Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Ron Tite, who is the founder of Church and State. Welcome to the program, Ron.
Mike, how are you?
Hey, doing good. It's always interesting to talk to new people and learn about what they do. And I always find it intriguing to see what their kind of brief path was to lead them to what they're doing, because it's really sometimes curious to see what kind of that flag was in your past that made you go, I'm going to do this, and here's my new mission and crusade. So give us a little bit of your background and what is Church and State? What led you to this cause?
Well, what some people think is that Church and State is a spiritual organization, which it is not a spiritual organization.
You did that to make people talk and think, and you did that on purpose, I'm sure.
Exactly. As you might know, in the advertising space, that has been for years something called the separation of church and state.
Sure.
The separation of content and advertising. And we firmly believe that that those lines are blurred, and that every ad can be a piece of content if it's responsible and authentic enough, and every piece of content can be an ad if it's or every ad can be a piece of content if it's good enough.
Yeah.
So we kind of look at the marketing ecosystem from all sides, and we have large multinational clients like Walmart and Manulife, John Hancock, and Microsoft, and people like that. And we're based in Toronto, Canada. But before I started my own agency, I was executive creative director at an agency called Novais, which is a large international network. And I think like a lot of entrepreneurs, I had this moment where I was shooting a commercial in Montevideo, Uruguay, for a large multinational consumer packaged goods company. And it was like the fourth time I had been in South America that month. And because when you are doing stuff in Canada, if you need a spring spot that you have to shoot in January, well, it's cheaper to shoot in Argentina and Uruguay than it is to shoot in Miami.
Huh.
So we spent a lot of time in South America. And so I was in South America the fourth time that month. And I remember we took this crew shot, and it was like 40 people. And I turned to my producer and said, how are we still doing this? Like, how are we still flying halfway around the world to shoot 15 to 30 seconds of television, a medium that fewer and fewer people are watching? And this just doesn't seem to match the consumer reality. And I returned and quit, and thought that I really thought, I wanted to help brands connect with consumers in more contemporary and meaningful ways. And so not only did I quit and start my own agency, I actually promised myself that I wouldn't work with anybody or any client that I had worked with before for the first 2 years of the business. Because
it's kind of like a personal challenge to you?
Well, I thought, if you're going to do it, you got to do it. And I had been the guy that had come in and written and produced TV spots for years. And I just thought, if I called the people I had called before and said, hey, I'm doing my own thing now, they all placed that definition on my forehead. It's like, oh, you're the TV commercial guy. Okay, you can do that. And I just wanted a complete change and wanted to start with a completely new approach. And so I thought that was the way to do it, was to seek out people who had not worked with me before.
And how did that work out? Obviously pretty well, because you named off quite a few good clients, so pretty fine.
Remarkably well. We're a boutique agency. We're about 20 people. So in addition to that, now that it's that size and it's running really well, I have partners that run the day-to-day of the agency, and I do about this year, I guess I'll do, 72 keynotes. So I spend a lot of time speaking, and that is an alternative revenue source and biz dev. And then I'm an author. My second book just came out called Think, Do, Say. So it's that kind of package of thought leadership and consulting and creative that kind of my world revolves around.
Well, let's talk about your book, Think, Do, Say, because I really like the sound of that. And I'll tell you one of the first thoughts that pop into my mind, and now you can tell me why you structured it that way, because It's kind of like ready, aim, fire, right? But then people make the kind of the funny thing to say ready, fire, aim, because that's what most marketing programs and campaigns do. Let's just fire, and then we'll aim later. So think, do, say. So what is the correlation between that ordering of the words?
And you're very right in that the ordering is very specific.
Yeah.
Traditionally, marketing has been about the say, right? It's like, whatever, somebody else is building the product, and we're gonna worry about the pricing of that product and the promotion of that product. And
you may as well just call it say at that point if you're talking marketing. Of course, then there's the song from back in the 80s.
Yes, the Paul McCartney, Michael Jackson band.
Yes,
they're like,
good job.
So, when we look at the real disruptive forces in marketing, we look at disruption through the lens of a political coup d'etat. And what happens in a political coup d'etat? Well, what happens is that the establishment is taken out. And the establishment is taken out because the establishment gets lazy, and the establishment gets out of touch with what the people actually want. And insurgent forces kind of storm the castle. They, gather the troops. They speak to the people in a way that the people want to be spoke to, and they take out the establishment. Now, in marketing, what we've seen is a coup of the establishment. And what has occurred is that the power of the actions and behaviors of an organization have become far more powerful than the promotion of them. And if you look at Amazon creatively, the design is horrible. I can't think of a tagline. All those things that we have defined by traditional marketing has gone by the wayside because the functionality of the things that they do and the business model is far more disruptive. And so that was one aspect of it. The second aspect was that I thought that marketers were chasing tactics. They were trying to game the system. And what they were doing was chasing the metrics through the promise, but they were losing trust because they never actually delivered on it. Yeah. And that wasn't part of the equation. So the think, do, say is very specific. It's that if we want to seize attention, if we want to get people to, look through the clutter and find their way to us, and we want to build trust over the long haul, because that means it's easier for customer loyalty and they come back to us, that we need to believe in something greater that goes beyond what we sell. We need to behave in a way that reinforces that belief. And then, and only then, if we believe in something more important and we act with intent to reinforce that belief, that is worth talking about. And if we're going to talk about it to gain attention and build trust, we need to talk about it authentically. We need to talk about it honestly. We need to say it in a really compelling way, in a really interesting way, and in an entertaining way. And the combination of those three means you can cut through and you can build trust and you can finally build your business.
Yeah. Really, really well said. And it reminds me of a couple things. One is it's almost like providing results in advance, meaning you got to walk the talk and talk the walk and do all the things. But to your point, if you just say, we do, and people are like, okay, well, show me. Well, let's go ahead and do it. What you just said, which is let's kind of take that lead and jump out in front and say, this is what we're doing, what we're going to do. And now they're kind of going, yeah, that's congruent with what you're saying because you're showing me. And you're not going to, obviously do an entire project in advance to show results in advance. But I think it's that mindset of let's give and serve and provide value so that then when I do talk, people do perk up their ears a little bit and listen because they see that I'm rolling up my sleeves and getting my fingernails dirty.
Yeah. This aspect of trust, I think, is really critical. There's a lot that has happened in the consumer mindset that outside of advertising. If you look at the past 10 years of the consumer mindset, this is what they're dealing with. Lance Armstrong lied to our faces. Bill Cosby went from America's dad to America's predator. Panama Papers did nothing. CEO compensation went through the roof. Every politician from all sides of the political spectrum completely lied to us and abandoned, family values. You can buy your way onto the New York Times bestseller list. Nobody trusts a Yelp review. Everything can be gamed. And so all those...
that's quite a mouthful there, but every single statement is fact.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so a marketer, you come up and you go, hey, you know what? This vacuum is going to be the best vacuum you've ever heard. And the consumer, or you've ever used. And the consumer's going, you know what? Spare me a bit. I don't.
Hey, did you ever read that Seth Godin book, All Marketers Are Liars?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
It reminds me of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just with Seth 2 weeks ago in Chicago.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, and then you show up and let alone in the corporate space, we've had Volkswagen with the emission scandals. We had Wells Fargo creating fake accounts. And so we know that as marketers, we have an inherent sales bias, which makes us prone to exaggeration. And so when you combine that with all these other things that are going on, the consumer's like, I'm not buying it.
Yeah.
And there's this interesting metaphor where if we look at Times Square, and in Times Square, I think that there are two levels of Times Square. And on one level is up top, big, bold, bright signs, big brands, big budgets, really expensive to be there. It's really slick. It's really perfect. The consumer still doesn't know where to look because they're just getting promotion from all sides. And they don't actually trust the big brands anymore because they've been let down so much and because they're too scripted and they're too polished. On the other hand, on the street, you've got people who are coming up to her who are way more nimble. They're way more aggressive. They can target their message to you as a person because they see you and they see what you're wearing and they see what your facial reaction is. And so there are people selling fake T-shirts. Someone's trying to steer you into a comedy club. There's someone telling you the end of the world is coming. Yep. So on one hand, they don't know where to look. And on the other hand, they don't know who to trust. So it's like, do I trust the big retailer that says they've got the best quality clothes? Not really, because they're a legacy retailer and those guys are out of touch. Or do I trust a retailer who comes into my Instagram feed that I've never heard before? Like, are these people going to be around in 6 months? That's where the consumer is at. They don't know where to look. They don't know who to trust.
So you mentioned it just in cursory, nobody trusts a Yelp review. And I would have to agree with that regarding Yelp. But let me pose this question to you. Reviews online, feedback, testimonials, when they're genuine and when they are consistently done and when they're congruent to your brand, what people already see, then they work well. But as a standalone, look at all these great reviews, please come buy my thing, then got it. So my question is, what is the solution? Because the Times Square example, all that stuff happening up above your eye line when you've got tech neck looking down at your phones and trying to not make eye contact to the guy trying to sell you whatever, Rolex on, fake Rolex. What is the solution to developing that trust/relationship in today's world? And I would suspect that it is a combination of a lot of things like content marketing, like word of mouth, like being seen as that authority and expert, and being able to have all that put together with maybe a referral, and then people Google you and say, okay, well they wrote this, did this, and there's a review or two that's good. Okay, I'll give them at least the time of day.
Yeah, I mean, you're right in that, the reason it's not that I have an issue with Yelp and all other TripAdvisor and stuff.
Yep.
I mean, those are for what they are, right? And it's like, come one, come all.
Yeah.
And so if it's not, and again, I'm not saying that, those reviews are lying or anything like that, but although they could, but it's that if I say, where's a great restaurant in Toledo, Ohio, and I go on those places, well, I don't know who those people are, and I don't know that they share my taste. And I'm just going at what everybody thinks. Well, I want to know what the people who think like me and act like me and like the stuff that I like, I want to know what they think. And so on one hand, from a review standpoint, we have to get way more targeted, matching like audiences.
Yeah.
So they can know, the people who think like them and act like them, whether they approve. That's one part. The second part is when we look at testimonials or social proof, as some may call it, that, the old world of testimonials was like, I was a writer before I was a creative director. I'd have to write them sometimes.
Yeah, and then just send it to them and go, hey, does this sound good? Yep.
Does this sound good? Right. And they were too scripted and nobody would actually talk like that. And you could read that crap a mile away.
Yep.
And now social proof is somebody, tweeting or Instagram, whatever, something authentically from a person, not coached by anybody, using real language. And so the new testimonial is somebody who provides one without being asked.
Yeah.
And that only comes by being honest and transparent, because that leads to trust. Honesty,
or being like our friend Seth Godin. I've done so much reading and listening to him, and you were just with him, like you said, but he would say by being remarkable.
Yeah. I mean, I think when somebody says, like, look, I have a problem, this brand solved that problem, and they dealt with it in a way that was authentically me and authentically them, then you're going to go, yeah, this did exactly what it was supposed to do. It made me feel exactly how I was supposed to feel.
Yeah.
And I think I want to celebrate that. And so I'm going to leave a comment somewhere.
So let's shift gears just a little bit, because we mentioned just really, really in passing the phrase content marketing. And I have a theory, and I think I've seen it confirmed a little bit online. And now I want to ask you, because I think you would be that kind of authoritative source to say, yes, this is the case, or no, it's not. So a handful of years ago, however many, 10, let's say, when content marketing became a thing, it was just all the rage. And my theory and my thinking now is content marketing is no longer a thing. And here's the reason why: because it should be in every solid, spectacular marketing plan and marketing initiative anyway. You just don't need to call it content marketing. Gone are the days of special, scarcity, buy now. It needs to be that helpful, giving value, authoritative, being an educator and an advocate for your target audience. And that's content marketing, but it just needs to be in your marketing anyway. Do you feel there's a delineation these days still?
You know that I gave a keynote last year at Content Marketing World called The Death of Content Marketing, The Rise of Content Marketing.
I'm asking the right guy then. I did not know that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So why is it dead? Am I close and heading down the right path?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I have a slightly different take on it. And to all your listeners who are like, here's somebody else who's saying the death of something. I get it. Obviously, things aren't dying. It was a clickbaitable keynote.
You got it.
But here's why I think it isn't. And what's interesting is that when I started my agency, I wrote a line of what I thought we should do for brands. And that line was, brands need to act like media properties, and media properties need to act like brands. Because I saw it as an ecosystem problem. And everybody was pointing at big brands and big agencies saying, you guys don't get it anymore. And I was pointing at the TV networks and the newspapers going, they don't get it either.
Yeah.
So we're all in this together. So that's what I thought. And somebody else said to me, oh, that's content marketing. I was like, oh, it's a thing? But what has happened is that whole world was essentially saying, how can we as marketers learn from content providers, from the newspapers, from the TV networks, from the magazine publishers? And now those people are starting to eat the lunch of brands, where they're using content to actually drive the sale of other merchandise and other revenue. So, for example, Paw Patrol. I have a 20-month-old son, so I know Paw Patrol. You may not know Paw Patrol.
I don't. I've got a 15-year-old to 21-year-old, so I'm not quite in that. But I do have a dog, so is it dog related?
It is a kids show.
It's like Blue's Clues back in the day.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So it's a kids show featuring dogs.
Got it.
And it's an animated show. And the animated show, which airs on TV networks as content, is made by a toy company.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, and some people would look at that and go like, oh, that's evil. Like, no, it's not. It's brilliant. They're, using the tools to their best advantage. But this is, so we used to go, you should act like a TV show. You're like, don't do that. They're starting to eat your lunch. So you need to act like a media property, but this is no longer content marketing. This is now called marketing.
Yes.
And you have to use all the tools at your disposal. And sometimes if you look at the traditional, consumer journey that, if you use Google's ZMOT, the zero moment of truth.
I literally did a presentation Tuesday evening, and one of the slides was ZMOT and said, Google it. You can find the PDF for free, and did a couple slides on that. So totally familiar with that, and it's so critical. And in that book is one of the slides that says, here's the percentage of people in specific industries that are influenced at the zero moment of truth. And it goes from 60 to 97%. The automotive industry, people are influenced by ZMOT 97% of the time. That is huge. And that tells us that they're influenced one way or the other. And if they're influenced in a negative way, they're never going to reach out and connect with your brand. So that's a big wake up.
Yeah, a huge wake up. And where I think content marketers get it wrong, is that if you use that consumer journey, if you use ZMOT and say, okay, we need content at every stop along the journey to influence the consumer decision. Well, the first part of that is the stimulus. And at some point, something happens where someone goes, oh my God, I should start looking for a new car. And sometimes that stimulus is a piece of content. And sometimes that stimulus is a car coming off lease. But sometimes that stimulus is somebody looking at a billboard.
Yeah.
And as long as it's a compelling billboard and an interesting billboard and a relevant billboard, that can work. And so you can't put the blinders on and say, we only do content. You're ignoring the stuff that actually works. To my original point, every piece of content can be an ad if it's responsible enough, and every ad can be a piece of content if it's good enough.
Well, when you mentioned Paw Patrol, it made me think of something else. And I think this is kind of like when you think about disruptors of the industry. One of the original disruptors, I feel, was back in the day when this company called a Blockbuster, who you would walk into the doors and for me at least, I don't know about you, but I would try to not make eye contact because they would always really in your face greet you. And it's like, I just want to get my movie. Let me move on. Well, I think if I understood the story correctly, Netflix came and said, let's join forces. And they're like, nope. And then Netflix ate them. Well, Netflix disrupted, but then I feel like they're even taking it further to the television industry because they're creating their own, a series. And so now they're pulling people that would watch some show on whatever network to go, hey, this Netflix series probably is multiple millions of dollars in production. Well done. And I want to watch that on Netflix. And oh, by the way, what's next? Let me now order this movie and rent and subscribe. So it's the same exact thing as the Paw Patrol that is sponsored by a toy company.
Totally. And what they figured out was that the business model of Netflix, which solved the problem. I mean, there was if you go back and listen to like early stand-up comedy, everybody had a bit on Blockbuster, and everybody was like, the late fees, and and so it's there. Everybody were telling them this sucks.
Yeah.
And nobody said anything about it. And then Netflix comes in and goes, don't worry about the late fees. And everyone's like, all right, now we're talking. Yeah. You solved my problem. But so that was the first area of disruption. But then the second thing was that they knew that they had actually nothing proprietary. That the real reason people tune in to TV stations, to streaming services, is the stuff that they watch. At the end of the day, people want to see good stuff. And they didn't control that, because they were curating it from other places.
Yes.
And they knew that, as we're seeing now, that when Disney goes, you know what, screw it, we're going to make our own. NBC says, you know what, screw it, we're going to make our own. They would be left with nothing.
Yep.
They saw the weakness in their own business model. And so they realized, if we really want to pull people in, we've got to make great stuff and control it. And I think what we're seeing now, though, is the full cycle of disruption. Where are we going to get to on this? I'll tell you we're going to get to. We're going to get to a package that's like a cable package that says you can get Netflix and you can get Disney and you can get NBC, you can get Crave, you can all these things for one monthly fee. That's where this is all heading.
Yeah. Oh, that's huge. So let's wrap up with this, Ron, because I think I think we're resonating and high-fiving enough over here. We could probably go on for the rest of the day and bring up more and more content. So I really love your mindset. Tell us about the book. What would you say is the one reason that someone should buy and read your book? And then what is the one takeaway that you feel like if someone sat down and just binge read it and walked away from that reading experience, what's that one takeaway that would be the most important one?
So the why you should buy the book, and I was very conscious about this, was that one, this is, and I think this is not hyperbole, I think this is the first business book in the history of publishing that doesn't mention Apple. Not even once.
Or Uber or Airbnb.
Like not even once.
Yeah, cool.
Because I just felt that we were using the same old case studies. It was there's no mention of Zappos in here. That and so we just need some fresh examples. That's one thing. The second thing is I spent 20 years as a stand-up comedian. It's a funny book, and I use the comedy to set you up. I set you up with laughter so that when the laughter dies down, I deliver the message I really want you to hear.
Yeah.
And so I think people will find it a really refreshing read because it's funny. There's some really fun stuff in there, while at the same time being strategically relevant. And then on the takeaway, I think what people will do is they will read this book and they'll go, I've got it. I've got the plan. I can work on this right now. What do I believe? Who do I do it for? What do they want me to do? Who do I do it with? And what do I say? How do I say it? This is really, it's a simple plan that if you're an individual solopreneur and you're trying to build your personal brand, you can work on this in 2 hours and have the answer to your business. If you're a large multinational organization, you can do the exact same thing. So it's really, the plan is really, really simple, and the journey to go through the plan is fun and adventurous and relevant.
I love it. And I know that I will put this in the show notes, but you can pick up copies of the book at thinkdosay.com. And Ron, I just really want to thank you for coming on. It was wonderful getting to know you and talking shop.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, you can get the book anywhere, any retailer, anywhere.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.